Elden Ring Nightreign is, perhaps, From Software's most bizarre and most genuinely interesting game so far. And I know, that's a tall statement, especially when the developer's other bold experiments have yielded results like Bloodborne, Sekiro, and of course Elden Ring itself. But, after playing the recent closed beta for the Elden Ring spin-off that is Nighreign, I feel pretty bullish about making that sort of statement. I mean, Bloodborne is the game that got me into the Soulsborne genre and From Software games as a whole, and Sekiro is my favorite game from them, period. While Elden Ring took the Souls formula and expertly added the open world dimension to it all. So look, what I'm trying to say is that I really love From Software's more off-kilter experiences. When the developer cuts loose and goes really crazy, that's when the magical stuff happens as far as I'm concerned. And Nighreign? Well, Nighreign feels like the evolution of that go crazy, go bold concept that's worked so well for From Software in the past. With Nighreign, it really feels like From Software is truly going beyond the pale of what they know. They're breaking new ground, and yet, as is their style at this point, they're still bringing in elements and ideas that work well in this framework from their past games. The focus, this time, is actually around a sort of 3-player co-op PVE experience, but with roguelike elements and the Battle Royale enclosing circle mechanic mixed in. Think Monster Hunter meets Fortnite meets an MMO raid, and you're like halfway there to understanding what makes Nighreign so darn unique? And yeah, I get that all of that may seem like a real random mishmash of things, and well, it kind of is, but darn it if it doesn't work with the way it's executed here. Now, before I dive into my overall impressions of it all, I really want to take a second and explain what I think From Software is going for with Nighreign. To explain what I understand as the core experience of the game from playing that open beta over the Valentine's Day weekend. Simply put, Nighreign is From Software's attempt to distill down the experience of playing a Souls game into a single, quick, short, roguelike repeatable run experience. And looking at that idea, well, it's actually a really bold and ambitious idea if you think about it. Can the experience of playing a Souls game, where you go through various places exploring, finding items and equipment, killing monsters, leveling up, and then ultimately fighting a very strong final boss enemy, be accelerated and shortened into an hour-long experience? From Software, with Nighreign, definitely seems to think so. And you'd think that just that idea, in itself, would be ambitious enough for the daredevils at From Software, but then there's the additional complexity of 3-player co-op, which makes things so much more chaotic and intriguing. So yeah, in essence, Nighreign, at least from what I've played of it, seems to be trying to create that same sense of accomplishment, of challenge, of thrill, that you get from playing a From Software Soulsborne game, but with 2 other players and in a much shorter, more repeatable time frame. And surprisingly, or unsurprisingly depending on who you are, for like 98% of the overall game, from what I've played, I'd say the game really nails this particular idea. It's so good at what it's trying to do that you can really tell that From Software spent a good deal of time tweaking and prepping this fun spin-off on their Elden Ring and Soulsborne formula. Nighreign is indeed the most fun I've had in a From Software game since the base game of Elden Ring itself. Nighreign is fresh, it's fun, there's tons of new mechanics to engage with, things to explore, and despite how short and repetitive the gameplay loop is, I never got bored in the 8-ish hours that I played the beta. Not only that, I'm actually hungering to play more, even if there are some things that I can see myself disliking, or at least terming as charming flaws when I've probably spent longer with the game. So today, I want to go over everything about Nighreign that I know so far, what I felt while playing it, what I understand it to be, where I think it's going, and the immense potential I see within the game from my 8 or so hours playing it thus far. Now, to set the stage for everything, And for those that aren't familiar with what Nightreign is exactly or how it goes about what it does, let me give you a quick rundown or primer on how a typical Nightreign run goes. If you're familiar with Nightreign or have consumed some preview coverage prior to this video, then well, just skip this section and head on over to the next chapter in the video, where I'll be talking about some more specifics about the game as a whole. Alrighty, so what do you do in Nightreign? Well, starting at the beginning, you always start off in the Round Table Hold, or a variation of what players know to be the Round Table Hold from Elden Ring. This version of the Round Table Hold actually serves as your home base and hub world in Nightreign, and there's quite a bit you can do in just this area before you even start a run, or an expedition as the game terms it. The Round Table Hold is, of course, where you can pick your character from a bunch of predefined, pre-built characters. The beta, in this case, gave us access to 4. It also gives you a place to go and practice with your character via a sort of training ground. And beyond that, there's a ritual altar where you can slot in the more permanent upgrades that you get in between runs. There's likely going to be other stuff inside this hub world, like say shops, NPCs, and whatnot, but in the beta, there was a lot of open area in this Round Table Hold that just felt empty and will likely have more depth added to it in the final release. There were a lot of new areas, broken walls, and things like that that seemed to hint at a more expanded area than even the base game of Elden Ring. But, for the purposes of the beta, the important part of the Round Table Hold, beyond selecting your character, is the actual round table in the center of the whole area itself. This is what you use to head out on the aforementioned expeditions. Now, once you decide to set out on an expedition, that basically starts your run and matches you up with 2 other players. I, for the entirety of the beta, played with a bunch of random people that the game matchmake me with. But the final game will, of course, allow you to totally set up a password and basically only play with the people you choose to, if that's what you want to do. Okay, so once you're matched with 2 other people, you get to a screen where everyone gets to see what the other players are picking, and you can then adjust your character pick to better suit the overall party dynamic for that session. We'll talk more about this later, but just for now, it's important to know that you can repick your character per run if need be, and there's also an allowance for duplicates between players. That is, you could have all 3 players pick one of the same character, for instance. Once everyone's picked their character within the time limit, you then start off with a really cool cutscene where you see your party heading out into the expedition itself. The game then has you fly over the map from a certain part of it, and you ultimately end up dropping down onto some random part of said map for that particular run. In the beta, there were about 2, maybe 3 distinct parts that the game would start you off in, so it's likely that these maps are not going to be completely random and different each time, just where you start and what you're able to access each run. Okay, so once you drop down into the map, the clock starts ticking. There's a circle that encases the map, much like a battle royale game like Fortnite, that gets smaller and smaller as time goes on. So you and your band of Nightfarers want to go around finishing off enemies, getting as strong as possible, getting enough loot in terms of weapons, talismans, consumables, before the circle gets as small as it can, and you end up hitting the end of the day. As the day ends, the circle encloses you into a smallish arena where you fight that day's boss. Survive, and you make it to day 2, where the cycle repeats, letting you explore the rest of the map and gather more resources and levels. And of course, the added twist here is that the game world gets a lot more hostile, sending in things like random enemies to come after you and make your life more difficult. Making it past day 2 and the second night boss then finally sends you to the spirit realm, and it's there at day 3 that you end up facing one of the Night Lords of the game, a sort of final boss per run in the game. In the beta, the Night Lord in question was Gladius, the Beast of the Night. Now, I'm not entirely sure what happens after you beat a Night Lord, since I never was actually able to beat it with the various strangers that I fought with. We got close one time, but yeah, I didn't beat it. Oh, And one important thing to note is that you can keep coming back during the day even if you die. But the one time where you can permanently die and end the run is at the end of each day when you are facing a boss in that enclosed arena. And death in this case means that all 3 of your party members are downed at the same time. So, that's the loop of Nighreign. Start off, quickly gather resources and strength, wall closes in, fight the night boss at the end of the day, repeat for day 2, and then ultimately try and take out the Night Lord if you even make it that far. Now, if all of that seems like a lot and an entirely different game from a Soulsborne experience, then well, it's because it very much is. Elden Ring Nightreign, as a game, is all about trying to rush you and get you to move quickly, and it piles on the pressure, really piles it on. Unlike a Souls game, where you can take your time, explore, meander, discover things, here, it's all about prioritization and going for what's closest and easiest. The most efficient approach and path given your particular situation at that point in time. Take what you can, leave what you can't, and keep moving as fast as you can. And the game is really optimized and adjusted to make going through that process of getting stronger and progressing your character as quickly as possible. You move a lot faster for one. You can jump, you can hop off of walls, which makes traversal 10 times faster. Then there's the fact that there's no fall damage. Leveling up is just a quick button press whenever you're near a site of grace. Running doesn't consume stamina unless you're in a battle, and you run really fast. And even picking up things is a simple button press, with the ability to swap things in and out of your inventory quickly and easily with another button press. Even the communication between players is facilitated, where you can pull up the minimap with one button press and leave a marker with another, letting players know where you want to go. And if you see that marker on screen, it's also a quick button press to agree on going in that direction. Speed is the name of the game here, and what is perhaps the thing that I think the game is most successful in, from the rather brief amount that I played, is in accelerating that whole experience of playing a Souls game. It feels really fun, going around at breakneck speeds, fighting enemies, grabbing new gear, and making snap decisions on what to keep, what to fight, and how to best get stronger as the walls literally close in around you. And when the walls do start to close in, you basically have to hightail it out of there and into the center of whatever the circle is at that point. In many a run, I would find myself suddenly running for dear life as the Nighreign grew stronger and the blue fiery walls around me would literally be at my back. There was no time to fight enemies, get items, or even visit a bonfire for a quick level up. And that was all on the first day too. Day 2 can get even more intense in terms of what you have to deal with. In one of my other runs, my team was actually attacked by none other than Margit himself, or the Foul Omen as the game termed him. And defeating him only resulted in a night pushed back message and the day continuing. Meaning, of course, that this encounter was a random encounter and not the actual night boss of the day. Okay, so yes, the game can get intense at times, but that's all part of the fun and can actually lead to some really fun emergent gameplay moments and stories. And I think that's the hallmark of both a good online game and a Soulsborne game. So, we've established that overall, Nighreign features this really fun gameplay loop with a lot of changes that really work in this overall package. But, as you might expect, not everything is perfect, especially since this is From Software's first attempt at this kind of 3-player co-op experience. There are undoubtedly some issues, although, in regards to them, I will say that none of them really served to decrease my excitement for the game. These issues feel more like warts or kinks that I do think, with time, iteration, and balancing, can be adjusted and ironed out, or just worked around from the player side, in all honesty. The first, and likely most obvious issue, is that your fun and enjoyment of Nighreign is really dependent on your team. The game, at least from the beta, felt like it was very much balanced and designed to be played by 3 players. And the game was the most fun for me when I had a team where both of the other players knew how to play cooperatively, beyond just being solid players of Souls games. The various characters you choose, the roles you specialize in during battles, scavenging, and boss encounters, all of those have to be done cooperatively. If everyone does their job, works together, and mobs the enemies, then Nighreign is a fun, grand experience. Heck, it can even feel a little easy. If, on the other hand, you run into someone who refuses to stick with the group, goes off and does their own thing, which the game totally allows, by the way, then, well, the entire team ends up with a severe disadvantage. And that's the thing with Souls players, isn't it? A lot of them like to go at these games solo, and a lot of them are generally specialists in these sort of games, and these games alone. There's enough Souls games, and more recently Souls-likes, that you can easily sustain your hobby of playing video games with just this one genre, especially if you go with replays and challenge runs and whatnot. Yet, what I found was that it was my knowledge of other co-op games, like say Monster Hunter, Remnant 2, or really any kind of game where it's co-op PVE, that came in really handy, alongside my general knowledge of various Souls games, whether it be in the weapons, the builds, and whatnot. Playing as a team means you prioritize the whole rather than yourself, and it's something that only a couple of teams I was matched with really understood. Nighreign doesn't have friendly fire, but instead actually lets you use your attacks, whether they be AoEs or otherwise, as the sort of method for reviving your players when they're downed. And prioritizing that your team be alive and firing on all cylinders was one of the more important things to do, especially in the middle of a boss fight. The minute people became selfish, or started to become the hero and wouldn't revive their allies or, go off in their own direction, things would quickly go awry. Which, honestly, makes so much sense if you've played other cooperative games. If you've played co-op games or even done things like raids in MMOs, then you know how all of this works. You need your tank, you need your DPS, your backline, your healer, etc., etc. Now, what's interesting is that at least in the beta, there wasn't any particular character that fit into that traditional healer or buffer role. Of the 4 characters or Nightfarers available in the game, each character, more than a particular build, archetype, or role, seems like they almost represent a different era of From Software game. Wilder, the character on the cover of the game, feels like he's basically straight out of the base game of Elden Ring. The Guardian is not only a tank, but feels like the classic shield and heavy weapon build that worked really great in the first Dark Souls game. The Duchess seems like a Dex character that's straight out of Bloodborne, and the Recluse is your standard magic caster that feels like she could fit inside any of the Souls games. Each character also gets 2 unique abilities or moves, beyond whatever weapon arts and abilities that they get with their starting gear. On PlayStation 5, these were activated by holding down the triangle button and then using either the left or the right triggers, L2, R2, respectively. The L2 ability is the one that you can use rather frequently and is on a bit of a cooldown, while the R2 ability has to be charged up by attacking enemies, and when you do charge it up, then you can unleash a devastating attack. And each character has their own sort of ability that can really not only vary up the gameplay, buff their allies and whatnot, but kind of outlines what their role is going to be in the various battles that you fight. So yeah, simply viewing Nightreign's party dynamics as an MMO raid party doesn't quite work out as a proper analogy or explanation for how the co-op systems in Nightreign actually work. Instead, it's more like every character has specific strengths and ways to be effective, and your success in the game largely depends on how you supplement and augment your allies' abilities with your own. Now, that's not to say that playing solo, which is the other option besides playing the game with 3 players, is entirely useless either. I actually, through sheer luck, was able to play the game solo for one run, where both of my match team members were either booted off the server or chose to leave the game session themselves. In either case, what I found was that playing solo allowed me to slow things down quite a bit. And after that solo run, I think I get why the game gives you the option of playing solo, beyond just the fact that people would have complained if From Software hadn't included this option. See, solo play is where you can potentially forget about advancing to the Night Lord, and instead, focus on familiarizing yourself with the map and the various game mechanics. In my solo run, for instance, I never made it past the first day, but I spent all the time I could understanding where things were, discovering hidden areas, and enemies that I could potentially take down faster. And then when I started the next run, with my new batch of random teammates, well, I was pointing out locations and charting a path forward towards getting stronger faster and moving things along better. The knowledge I gained while going solo, the effort I put in familiarizing myself with the map, is something that I think quite a few players will use in between team runs to get better and better at the game's maps and various locations. Of course, all of this assumes that the level of random generation that was seen in the beta is the level that the final game is going to keep things at. I suppose this is more of a concern than anything else, but I'm really hoping that Nighreign, in its final form, doesn't lean too heavily on the randomization aspects of the roguelike genre. Sure, I get that loot and monster drops have to be randomized, but I do hope that the general map is kept the same between runs, with the same enemy placements and weapon and item locations. And the reason for this is that since Nightreign is a roguelike, it needs to have some form of meta progression between runs beyond just the permanent relic upgrades that you get to make your character stronger by equipping them in the game's hub world altar screen. Again, if the game just keeps things the way they were in the beta, then I think this is going to make a lot of Souls players happy, as that sense of exploration and discovery is going to form the backbone of future and more successful runs in the game. Alright, so, yes, your enjoyment of Nighreign is going to be dependent on both your prior knowledge of and ability to work in a team, as well as the people you team up with. That means, of course, that there is a good chance that when the final release comes out, you may very well need to either find 3 friends to play with, or hope that there's enough people trying to match with other random players to be able to have fun. Matchmaking is a general problem in online games, so I'm really curious to see how From Software is going to handle this particular problem, if at all. In any case, after the initial hype for the game dies down, I'm hoping that a solid community of players will form around the game that continue to play it and make playing it a fun and enjoyable experience. And speaking of fun, there is one other thing that I think was fine in the beta, but which I think would be great to tweak somewhat, and that's the Nighreign circle itself. Simply put, the darn thing moves too darn fast, and often will interrupt some really fun and enjoyable moments in the game. I know the idea is to keep things fast-paced, but I think Nighreign can get a bit too overzealous with that idea. In the beta, I tried multiple times to take down one of the big dragon enemies that's chilling on the field. It didn't matter whether I tried on day 1 or day 2, I almost always would just not have enough time with my team of 3 to take the thing down. The Nighreign would always come in and cut the fight short. Not only that, but near the end of the day, when the Nighreign starts to really close in on the final arena for that day, well, depending on what you're doing, it's easy to be caught with your pants down. There's not enough time, for instance, to hit a bonfire and restock your flasks and health in preparation for that big battle. And hey, you can totally argue that that's part of the game's design, that it's something that's part and parcel with keeping track of the current situation that you're in. And I get that, I do, but I think I'd rather have slightly harder bosses with more health and have the game be a bit more forgiving in terms of the time management aspect rather than the reverse. As it stands, as soon as the Nighreign starts closing in on you and getting heavier as the game calls it, you basically need to start sprinting in a straight line towards the center of the circle without much time to do really anything else on the way. But again, like I said at the top of all of this, none of these things, whether it's the fast Nighreign or the co-op stuff or anything, none of this stuff feels like a deal breaker or a huge issue that will ruin the game. In a lot of ways, there's even an argument to be made that these things exist for a reason, and they set limitations on the player in order to craft the kind of experience that From Software is going for. And well, I can't totally argue against that if that's how you feel. Finally, I will say that much like what a lot of other big creators in the Souls community have mentioned, that is people like Fextralife, Ratatoskr, Iron Pineapple, etc., I also don't believe that this game is really for every Soulsborne player, or even every From Software fan. If you're huge into taking your time, exploring the map, finding lore elements and whatnot, then Nighreign is largely uninterested in giving you those things. There's indications that there will be some lore-related drops and things to discover, but the beta, at least, showcased none of this. And so, if you care about combat, trying out new weapons and builds, working cooperatively, and fast-paced gameplay and traversal, then well, that is where Nighreign really shines and really provides. To that point, I think the folks over at Fextralife in their video said it best. Nighreign feels like the end game or post game of Elden Ring. I really agree with that. The game definitely feels like it's meant to be played by people who really have a good understanding of Elden Ring and have played a good deal of it. The people who really love the way its systems and combat mechanics feel and want a fresh, new take that challenges them to not only play faster and more efficiently, but do so with other players in cooperation as well. Is that an experience for everyone? No, not really. Is it an experience that I'm super excited for and can't wait to play more of and dive into? Most definitely. I mean, after the disappointment I felt at Shadow of the Erdtree, the video for which is of course linked in the description, well, Nighreign feels like such a fresh, inventive, and interesting package. It feels like a proper spin-off and expansion to the ideas and concepts of the base game of Elden Ring, while also being a pretty big divergence from it all. The game smartly remixes all the various aspects of not only Elden Ring, but as the trailers for the game have shown, all of From Software's catalog of games. And this kind of smart reuse of assets, of monsters, and these tweaks to both them and the core gameplay loop is the kind of inventive stuff that really makes me excited for what From Software is cooking up next. Nighreign also really puts into perspective what these smaller projects that studio head honcho Miyazaki mentioned From Software was going to be working on in his post Shadow of the Erdtree interviews. So yes, I'm super pumped for Nighreign. I've got the game's collector's edition pre-ordered, and I can't wait for the game to come out in May so I can play a ton of it. And in the end, as we often do on this channel, I'd love to hear about what you think about all of this, especially if you're one of those awesome people that made it to the end of the video. Your opinions are definitely going to be insightful, interesting, and add dimension to everything I've said in this video thus far. So I ask you, is Nighreign a bold new direction of hope for you? Or is it a weird little divergence that you'll skip for now? Let me know in the comments, and let's talk about this game before it comes out in May.